Hey guys, this is Fight Commentary Breakdowns. This is probably going to go on Fight Commentary Chats. So we have Raul here, Raul Ramirez. He runs Catch Wrestling Alliance here in LA. So Raul, welcome.
Hey, good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So let's just jump into it. You know, a lot of people have heard about catch wrestling. Probably one of the biggest representatives that people think about is Sakuraba. What is catch wrestling? Let's just get that out of the way for people who don't know what catch wrestling is.
All right. Well, it's basically like the granddaddy of what we know or what we understand of as wrestling or amateur wrestling nowadays. And that's the thing that kind of is weird because like you'll see these like Olympic and folk style wrestling fans. I've met many of them. I've been to different like NCAA wrestling finals and stuff, and a lot of people don't know that their favorite style of wrestling or what they believe to be wrestling came from an even more exciting version where not only was there pins but submissions as well. That's kind of what it is like real wrestling. So all the different things about staying off your back and all that, plus submission holds.
Oh, interesting. Are there strikes in catch wrestling?
No. I mean, you can kind of do some pain compliant stuff. So that's like maybe you can kind of like back elbow someone a little bit to get them to move their head, but you can't really like close fist like punch somebody.
I see. I know something a lot of catch wrestlers do. They use their shoulders a lot, right? Like kind of like press it into things.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Totally fine.
So, Raul, tell me about your martial arts journey. How did you get into catch wrestling?
It actually started with Chinese martial arts. So, and actually even before then, when I got into Chinese martial arts, is because as a little boy, I watched Karate Kid, and I was really inspired by it. But I grew up out in the Palm Springs area, like out in the desert.
Mm-hmm.
There's really no school around me, and there's very little of anything around just besides tumbleweeds and all that. So I had to wait till I was a teenager before I could start training. And then when I did, I just really like went 5-6 days a week. I ended up traveling to China to do kickboxing and wrestling there in Beijing Sports University. And everything that I knew about like fighting and grappling was more of this top-down approach where it's like you start standing, take someone down, see if you can't land on top of them. And but when I ended up going to UCLA as a undergrad and training there we had like a really cool student gym, and we had all these different martial arts classes for everyone. And then we had a lot of times where people could spar each other from all these different styles. And I ended up like sparring and rolling with a lot, and even taking a lot of the jiu-jitsu classes, but it just didn't seem quite right for me. It didn't have that top-down approach that I was used to. And that got me kind of researching catch wrestling. And then when I found out about it, and I went to train in it, and then I ended up training also like in Wigan, England, and competing there, for several years, and also training with Billy Robinson. I went privately as well to train with him in Arkansas. So that was like once I found it and I found authentic instructors, then I went in and like just like how I basically once I had the opportunity, I just really dove in like really, really deep.
And how many years were you at the Beijing Sports University?
Beijing, I didn't get the degree. I went during summertime. That was still when I was at UCLA.
Oh, I see. Wow. Yeah, because it's so cool to hear you were at the, Beijing Tixiao, it's called. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh man, it's a really great school. And actually I had a chance to go back like a couple years ago too. It's changed a lot, but still like a lot of the elite athletes are there, and like their women's freestyle team is really one of the best freestyle wrestling teams in the world.
Wow.
There a few of the women are able to beat some of the Japanese women who are considered like the best in the world. And they train there at the Beijing Sports University, and I had a chance to meet with their coach and all that. Like the guy you see on TV on the Olympics, like he's just there, they're training there.
Wow. And then the fact that you trained under Billy Robinson, man, that guy's a legend in like any type of grappling. I think, and most grapplers know of Billy Robinson in some way. So, wow.
Yeah, there's a lot of marketing, but yeah, not that he wasn't great, but yeah, it's like I think almost like Sakuraba. I think Sakuraba a little bit different, but because Sakuraba did MMA and all that, but then you have Billy Robinson even though he spent a lot of his life doing pro wrestling. I think that's kind of the thing that people, or I would want people to understand, where it's like you'll see a lot of these Billy Robinson pro wrestling matches, and then they're saying like, "Oh man, that's catch wrestling." It's like, no, even though Billy trained and knew catch wrestling, that's not exactly catch wrestling. Actually, it's just not catch wrestling. That's pro wrestling, and then that was a set match. Even so, Billy will sometimes say that, someone, even though the match was predetermined, like the winner was predetermined, sometimes they didn't want to go along with that, and maybe he'd have to kind of wrestle a little bit to make sure that either he won when he was supposed to win. But I mean, still, it's like they're still allowing, like when you see some of these cool moves or spectacular stuff, it's like I work with a bunch of pro wrestlers, and they're really good at making it seem believable, but it's still part of what we call a worked match. It's still predetermined.
Wow. So
that's why. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, well, that's why it's kind of cool where you see Sakuraba. I think it's probably the difference where it's like you see Sakuraba doing an MMA match, really pulling off, like when he broke Henzo's arm. That was a real, like he definitely wasn't allowing Sakuraba to break his arm. Right?
Yeah. Tell me about Catch Wrestling Alliance. How did you start it, or tell me more about the story behind Catch Wrestling Alliance?
Well, that was the thing. Like I trained with Billy, and actually one of the things that really influenced me as well was training privately with Billy, having a lot of conversations with him about what he would want to keep in catch wrestling, but then also training in Wigan, who is headed by Roy Wood, who people have to know that he is the successor of like the Billy Riley, the guy who trained Roy and Billy Robinson. So, and then also learning from my friend John, he's on the East Coast, and his teacher Billy Wicks. I know a lot of them are named Billy, but
nice. But, yeah, I'm writing all this down so viewers can, if you want to look it up later, I will put all this in the description.
And a little family tree kind of thing. But so even Billy Wicks too. I mean, a lot of these old timers, speaking with them, they have a similar point of view. I mean, one of the things is like they didn't choke people, right? And even that goes back to even Frank Gotch and like these older, like early 1900 figures that are champions in catch wrestling. That was just the way it was. They would neck crank people, double wrist lock, toe hold, but heavy emphasis on pinning people. So this thread still continues on till, well, hopefully this day. And then that's kind of the thing that's what Catch Wrestling Alliance is about, where it's like we're still trying to continue doing things the way they were, but because a lot of the old timers, and then myself included, we felt like that's kind of not the way catch wrestling is being marketed or presented, where it's either pro wrestling or some kind of fancy, what we call show hold, where it's like maybe a low percentage move that might not work on a lot of people, or some kind of weird chokes and stuff like that. That's not exactly the way these old timers thought of catch wrestling as it was. And so that's what we're trying to present, and really trying to popularize the authentic version, but it's also very effective. I mean, I compete and I train people around the world. Also here in LA, I also roll at a 10th Planet gym, and all this stuff really works.
Yeah. And I think this is a natural thing that many martial arts who might know about catch wrestling might ask you, which is, okay, catch wrestling versus BJJ. What should someone who, let's say, doesn't have any grappling training, like, or should they train in both, or should they get started with one and move to the other? What do you think about that whole debate?
Personally, because, I love catch wrestling, right? So I would say definitely you want to do the catch wrestling. Of course, I'm sure any jiu-jitsu person would want to argue with me, but because authentic catch wrestling has that heavy emphasis on wrestling and pinning someone, that is really going to help you, and in many ways. So like even on some of the social media posts, I try to tell people about the importance of pinning. I think right now a lot of jiu-jitsu people think that it's ridiculous because you don't win a match, or you don't win a jiu-jitsu match by pinning someone or whatever. But the thing is, by pinning someone and getting like putting a lot of pressure on them, there's like a whole thing now in jiu-jitsu about pressure passing. Like, hello guys, that's kind of pinning principles, right? So that's one of the big things that I try to tell people. It's like, if you're really good with this wrestling pressure, getting people on their back and kind of pinning down their limbs and stuff like that, you can pass their guard like faster than you realize. Or also, if you are trying to pass their guard and it's a really tough opponent, they might try to sweep you, but because you have a good wrestling base, it's a lower chance that they'll be able to sweep you, right? And you'll be able to, pass their guard and pin them and try for your submission. So if you control their movement, then chances are you can get one limb loose and maybe try for a double wrist lock, or say if you're in jiu-jitsu competition, totally fine to like choke them out or whatever. Because especially since a lot of neck cranks are illegal in a lot of jiu-jitsu competitions. So, you can win in Rome, you can choke, but try to promote like the way it was done. So that's why our events, we bar the choke.
Yeah, that's so interesting. A guy who's appeared on Fight Commentary Breakdowns before, Sean Mcdonald, he loves to neck crank. He always neck cranks. So he's a jiu-jitsu guy, but I don't know where he learned that neck crank, and I suspect it's probably from catch wrestling. He's always neck cranking people. Everything is neck cranks, like, oh! So, yeah, neck cranks are effective, man. They're very effective.
Oh, yeah, I think people don't realize it, right? Sometimes they'll say, like, oh, like I can just brush your arm off or whatever, but it's like not if someone does it well.
Yeah, yeah. And that kind of like muscular tension stays with you for a few hours after you get a good neck crank.
Oh, totally. Totally.
Yeah. Wow. Going along what you said, I think even in a self-defense kind of scenario, sometimes if you pin someone well, they'll lose their will to fight you very, very quickly. I've seen it, thank goodness I've never been pinned, but I've seen two people get into a fight where one guy he was so good with his toppers, he's pinned the other guy. The guy struggled a little, trying to throw strikes when he's pinned. Eventually, he's like, okay, all right, I give up. I've seen it happen before.
Yeah. Actually, there have been like several, like, was it like security cam footage where it's like one was like in a parking lot and the police officer wasn't able to keep the guy down, and then some guy with some wrestling experience, the guy was face down, he was able to fold the legs and smash them down, so then the guy wasn't able to get up, and he held so this bystander with some wrestling experience was able to hold the guy down, while then the police was able to then like handcuff him, or like you were saying too, it's like some Iowa wrestler, I believe, pinned some dude down at a gas station recently. It was in the news, where it's like he just pinned the person down trying to hold up like some convenience store, and then the guy gave up and the police were able to come and apprehend the person. So these things about controlling someone, I think people should realize that they're associated with pinning, right? So they shouldn't necessarily like dismiss pinning.
Yeah. And I'm thinking also there's some potential changes in certain policing policies too, right? I know New York City, for example, is thinking about even banning any type of chokehold. So it's like if cops aren't allowed to choke and stuff, potentially there's going to be more training them in sort of catch wrestling techniques that don't involve constricting the airway and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah, totally. And going back to that pinning pressure, yes, or even some of the double wrist lock stuff, you can easily hold on to a person by, just giving them a little bit of pain, and, so you can restrain them, really without causing major damage whatsoever. Because once you let go of the hold, it's all gone, right?
Makes sense. So tell me about sort of the day-to-day in Mr. Ramirez here. Do you train students full-time, or is that your side hobby? Tell me about that.
It's a little weird right now with COVID, right? But I end up sometimes having to travel. But also, I teach here at Fight Science MMA in Los Angeles. But like next week I have to travel to Las Vegas. I have to train a few women for an upcoming MMA match. So like hopefully when COVID kind of clears up, I can go back to even Asia and stuff, because I also have a fighter in China that right now we're corresponding online, but it'd be great it's better in person, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Besides that, I'm also a physician. I do acupuncture, but that's becoming more and more limited. But it's because it's also a passion of mine. So I still treat patients a couple days a week.
I see. I see. So, as you're talking about fight science, I'm going to put that in the description too. But fight science, it seems like a really cool, like hybrid place where people can get a lot of training in different arts, right?
Yeah. I think that's because like their whole their whole model is MMA, right? That's like their main focus. So whatever can help, they love it. And so I've had plenty of their MMA team come to my class. I also, went to their trainings as well. They have special MMA team training. So basically helping them to put it all together. But yeah, it just has like a great like atmosphere. So it's not necessarily so like dogmatic or whatever, like as maybe some cultish jiu-jitsu gym or something. Right. So yeah, I think because it's like MMA focused, then they seem to be more about like, oh, what's going to help me fight better.
That's awesome. Are they affiliated with that TV show at all? Because I remember there was a TV show called Fight Science, or is it just a coincidence, the naming?
I think it's more of a coincidence because the owner, I don't know if he definitely wasn't on the show, but he's really more about science. He loves all the like research and stuff like that. So that's why even right now, because of COVID, we're definitely not we're not really open, right? So even before then, he was like making sure that everyone was taking the temperatures and making sure we're keeping track of who showed up and stuff. So I think ultimately that's also because I'm a physician too. So it's like, I prefer stuff like that. Whereas, you don't want a gym that's just like allowing anybody to train because that's why we have like spikes and infections.
Yeah. Unfortunately.
It's like,
Is the catch wrestling you teach the same as CACC? Catch as catch can?
Yes. So that's the thing about catch wrestling. It actually has a few names.
Okay.
So I think originally it probably would have been called Lancashire Wrestling.
Oh.
Developed in that region of England. So like, but how it kind of got the name, so catch as catch can, is because unlike other regional styles where you had a set starting position, so you had like a Scottish back hold where you actually had to start with hugging your other person and try to get the takedown and stuff. And there are a few other styles that had a set starting position. Catch wrestling didn't have that. And say like maybe certain styles, say like the French wrestling that we call Greco-Roman now, you can't really grab the legs and stuff. But catch wrestling, you were allowed to grab the legs. You were allowed to grab anywhere. Right from the beginning, you start neutral, and then you can. That's basically why it was a catch as catch can. So you can get the leg and get whatever. Not so much, according to my understanding, it wasn't so much about like, oh, you can do any submission you want. It was like, no, you actually, unlike the other nearby styles, you started neutral, and you can grab a leg if you want or whatever.
Wow. Why do you think catch wrestling didn't take off same way that, let's say, some of the other martial arts styles took off? As at least in the public consciousness, I love catch wrestling. That's why I'm doing this interview. But why don't more martial artists know about catch wrestling?
Because it almost went extinct, and that's why we have catch wrestling. Because it was so dominant. It was the dominant martial art. Say one event was Frank Gotch versus Hackenschmidt, right? So this sold out a whole baseball stadium. I think it was Wrigley Field in Chicago.
Wow.
So that was over 30,000 seats at that time. And also Madison Square Garden, we had like Earl Caddick's match, one of the last matches that was real professional catch wrestling. Was at Madison Square Garden. So it was huge. It was really big. It rivaled, the other sports in baseball and boxing was also huge. But unfortunately, then, after Frank Gotch died, it was starting to get into the teens. We did have a lot of promoters trying to make money. So then they started to try to promote, we call it worked matches. So the predetermined matches. That's a way where people can make a lot of money and also maybe even minimize injury because then they can kind of, fake it a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And so that happened, right, when we went to what we call pro wrestling nowadays. And then another thing that happened was the Olympics, right? So when they started doing the Olympics again, they had the two really most popular styles of grappling at that time. So French wrestling, they changed the name to Greco-Roman. And then what they called amateur catches, catch can. So they already, from the beginning, they already neutered it a little bit. So they cushion holds. And so then, but then over time, then they even changed the name from amateur catches, catch can to freestyle.
I see. So that's what happened. So freestyle wrestling is a kind of a neutered version of catches, catch can.
Yeah, and it was called so at that time. It was amateur catches, catch can. That's kind of those. I would say those two main things like really helped the demise of authentic catches, catch can. So, because anybody, they really wanted that Olympic gold medal, right? So they'll, even nowadays, they'll compete with under any rule set that is set, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's why even nowadays freestyle matches, like, they're super short. I mean, some of the rules are ridiculous. It doesn't necessarily resemble what could be considered like a real fight or whatever. If you just roll the person over a few times and you can win by points, and you're not really, I don't know. Anyway, so it's so far from what catch wrestling was, or what real professional wrestling was, and then also pro wrestling when it went to these worked matches. So by the time you got even World War II, actually probably by the time World War I was done, a lot, the majority of these matches were worked, right?
Wow.
So we had I mentioned, Earl Caddick and Joe Stecker's match from Madison Square Garden. After that match, they were offered by promoters to travel to do a tour around the United States, where Joe would win one match and Earl would win one, and they'd be back and forth. And both men, because they were real wrestlers, they're like, I can't do that. Let's just quit.
Wow.
Yeah, Caddick had his own kind of side hustle in his hometown, so he just kind of retired and just worked at his hometown. So
wow,
there were
that's so interesting.
Yeah, there are a lot of legit guys, or even up and comers who dreamed of becoming the champ, and if they had something else they could do, they just went for it.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing you talk about how catch wrestling almost died out, right? And it reminds me of many styles, for example, that kind of died out. And I guess sometimes it is like that. It's not that it wasn't ineffective or whatever. It's just sometimes the people had other things to do, and the marketplace just wasn't either ready for it, just wasn't. It just wasn't a thing in the marketplace. So they're like, I'm a dentist on the side, or, I'm a librarian on the side, or I'm this on the side. Well, let's just do that, right? Sometimes it's just natural, but I'm glad catch wrestling didn't completely die.
Yeah, me too. Thankfully, you had Wigan, so you had the man Billy Riley, who was wrestling in the early days, and then he ended up making his own gym, and so you still had a facility that was teaching the real thing. But what people don't also realize is that besides learning the real thing, he also, in order to make his wrestlers earn a living, he would still teach them some of the the worked stuff, so that they can make money.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, even he said, or one of his main things that he would tell his wrestlers is to make sure you learn some trade, right? So that you have something else to fall back on. So,
wow. In a way, talking about sometimes when it comes to authenticity of martial arts, it's good if the person doesn't rely on that martial arts for their meal. Because then they can almost, if they really care about the martial arts, they can just teach the real martial art and not teach stuff for anyone, right? Because, I have to get students to get the tuition. So that's really interesting. It's interesting that the philosophy of many of these catch wrestlers was no, you have to have a fallback. Well, you have to work a job. That way, when you do teach catch wrestling, you're teaching the right thing. And, if it never takes off, you at least don't ever starve. It's really interesting.
Yeah, and actually, going back to some of the Chinese martial arts, right, or Chinese martial artists, where suppose you have some of these masters that were just I don't want to just train anybody, right? So, it could be where something could or has the potential of dying out because people care so much about the authenticity.
Yeah. Man, that's so interesting. It's how do you find that balance? It's really good stuff that's authentic, but also you can survive it, right? You go too much into the authentic thing, then it's like, one, it might not get tested as much, so it might lose its effectiveness after a few generations, but two, it might just die out. But then if you too mass market it, it gets watered down. I mean, even jiu-jitsu, which is probably one of the most proven one-on-one best self-defense type of, martial arts, even that, a lot of times people complain it's getting watered down, et cetera. All these complaints about jiu-jitsu in these current 10 years. So yeah,
you get that McDojo stuff going on, right, in jiu-jitsu.
Yeah. And my kind of criticism of some jiu-jitsu gyms is that they're trying so hard to franchise, trying so hard to expand that, the whole point back in the day was like, you get the best instruction starting when you're white belt. But a lot of times that's not what's happening anymore. Some of these gyms, maybe there's 3 or 4 locations, and the black belt or the head instructor doesn't teach. He can't teach at all the locations all at once, right? So maybe there's like a purple belt teaching, or there's actually a jiu-jitsu gym that I one time walked into. There was a white belt teaching.
Wow.
Yeah. And, there's other gyms where there's brown belts teaching. But yeah, like you can start to see some of these cracks in kind of like that amazing facade that jiu-jitsu built for so many years. It's starting to kind of get chipped away if, it gets too mass market and too sportified.
Yeah, and that's the thing that with Catch Wrestling Alliance, we want to really try to not just like certify just anybody, and definitely have to show, like, we have a curriculum, because we do have an online program to just let people know, because like so few people actually live, and it's weird because we got like 10 million people in LA, right? But like not all the people who are emailing me are like from other countries or different parts of the country. So we do have an online program, but yeah, it's a different levels, and also a curriculum where we have to be in contact with each other, and I really have to know that you're doing it right, and then you can also do it in like a actual grappling situation. Because that's like a big problem, right? Where it's like, you don't want some white belt just representing you, and like it looks bad, like how you kind of mentioned about the jiu-jitsu situation.
Yeah. And again, from what I'm talking about, guys, that was only one example. Okay, please don't interpret this as me saying a lot of jiu-jitsu gyms have white belts teaching. I've only seen it once, but it's already worrisome to see it once. That's why I'm mentioning it.
Yeah, and I think maybe it could be an example of someone maybe trying to expand too much or whatever. So, so it's like we are not so concerned about that. So we just want to make sure that quality over quantity kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. So, here's the thing, and I guess you would be a person to answer this question. I've heard many people talk about Sakuraba, and the consensus I've been reading from all the keyboard warriors in the comment section seem to be that Sakuraba was just a very mediocre catch wrestler, right? I don't know if that's the right word to describe him, but maybe what they're trying to say is he didn't even get trained that much in catch wrestling. Is that kind of a right way of describing Sakuraba's catch wrestling training? Like, it wasn't even like really good catch wrestling. It was just like he got trained maybe a few years, or I don't know how long.
I mean, he did have like a freestyle background, but the thing is, like, freestyle, and this is the argument. Then you see some freestyle people claiming like, oh, well, he's doing freestyle. It's like, no, double wrist lock's not freestyle, guys. Right? So, breaking people's arms doesn't happen in the Olympics, right? I mean, well, actually, but there was that one example that was an illegal double wrist lock that was used by Dave Schultz, but anyway, that's not that's really not freestyle, right? So. He not only did he get trained by Billy Robinson, he also got trained by my other coach, Roy Wood, who's still coaching in England. But both Billy and Roy said that they did spend a lot of time, like trying to teach a lot of the Japanese like the real thing. So I mean, I think that there's some things when I see Sakuraba in his matches that he would do that is really catch wrestling like, but I think he would do them a little bit differently. So even I'm sure Billy, and I think he's even said it's like even if you'd watch the match, you'd be like, oh, you're just doing it wrong, even though he ended up winning the match.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't necessarily consider him mediocre or anything like that. It's just a little different, but also still great. Truly.
Yeah,
the results were there, right? It's like the results are undeniable, really, because you see Henzo nowadays, he's still teaching and all that, and So it's like, and it's not like he's like a million times better now. I mean, he's still, it's still teaching fundamental jiu-jitsu and stuff.
Yeah. Wow. I think for the editing of this, what I'll probably do for viewers who see this later, I'll probably overlay some footage of Raul teaching and stuff like that, because they do have a YouTube channel. So I'm actually subscribed to your channel with fight commentary breakdowns, but I just went into fight commentary chats and subscribed to you too. So
Cool.
two subscribers of you. But yeah,
Thank you.
It's fascinating to see sort of catch wrestling being taught. And I think once the lockdown is over and stuff, I would love to come film in person, man. I think you're the second catch wrestler I've ever met. The first catch wrestler I met was this guy named Victor Marks. So, and I think he mostly does jiu-jitsu now, but I think he started out in catch wrestling. So I'll have to let him know that I got to talk to you. And yeah, I will 100%, once all this craziness is over, I'll come film your place. I'm so excited. This is like a place I've been looking forward to checking out for probably 2 years, and somehow I dropped the ball. So my apology, because I looked at our communications. I definitely contacted you in 2018, and I just like forgot, or I don't know what happened. Life happened.
Wow, I see how it is. We were chasing some jiu-jitsu guys.
Yeah. So, viewers, this was Raul Ramirez from Catch Wrestling Alliance, and I will have the links to everything there. But I will bring him back, and we will go film his place too. So this is going to be great, man. Raul, please come back soon, and maybe I can even bring you back. Like maybe if there's a UFC fight or something, I would love to get like a catch wrestler's kind of perspective on something or something like that. So if that's something you're interested in.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And it'd probably even be good if we can do something where it's like we can kind of even like, well, if we could do it live and, maybe have like real examples, right? So it's not just like
that would
talking
be great.
about it. Yeah, because I think sometimes the catch wrestling perspective is so foreign to a lot of grapplers, where it's like if I just describe something, they'll be like, "What the? I can't even envision."
I don't know how like what extent of social distance you are, but you are welcome to come over to my place, and we got cameras, we got mats and everything. Love to just film you, or if you're okay, maybe I can even come, just me with my mask and everything, proper protocol. I could come film you just myself. So the offer's there, man.
Okay, cool. Yeah, let's do it.
Awesome. So viewers, man, this might even go up on the grappling channel too, but we're going to see Raul in person soon. So this was Fight Commentary Chats.